Hello, Leo. Tell me, have you ever felt someone slowly slipping away from your life, even while they're still right there beside you? If you're here right now, it's not random. You didn't just stumble onto this video, you were guided here. Your higher self brought you to this exact moment because something deep within you already senses a shift. And you're ready to face it. Welcome to Eternal Mindfulness. This is your sanctuary of spiritual clarity, where we don't just predict, we awaken. What you're about to hear isn't just another horoscope. It's a sacred download from the universe, channeled directly for Leo, for your heart, your soul, and your next chapter. Over the next few minutes, we'll dive into a powerful cosmic current affecting Leo from May 15th through the 17th. During this window, the universe is initiating a soul-level separation, one that may feel subtle on the outside, but is absolutely life-altering within. Have you noticed emotional distance lately? Perhaps someone you once felt deeply connected to is now harder to reach, harder to feel. There are no arguments, no final words, no dramatic exits. Just an invisible gap, growing quietly. And here's the truth, Leo, that's not your imagination. That's your intuition, your lion-hearted sensitivity picking up energetic ripples before they reach the surface. This is not punishment. It's not abandonment. It's divine alignment. You're not losing someone. You're being redirected to yourself. Because you, Leo, more than any other sign, feel life through the heart. And when your soul is evolving faster than your connections, you begin to feel a deep, quiet ache. The truth is, someone is losing you. And they won't even see it coming. Before we go further, I invite you to drop a comment below with the angel number you've been seeing lately. 111? 555? 999? That number is your spiritual GPS. Let's see who else in this community has been receiving the same signal. Now, allow me to take a moment and express my deepest, most heartfelt gratitude for your presence. Every like, every comment, every subscription brings your energy deeper into the Eternal Mindfulness family. You are not just a viewer, you are a part of a cosmic ripple, helping this message reach the souls who need it most. Your support fuels this space, allowing us to continue sharing the kind of guidance that doesn't just speak to the mind, but awakens the spirit. And trust me, dear Leo, you will want to stay with me until the very end of this reading. Because what the universe is about to reveal? It's not just powerful, it's transformational. So let me ask you, what happened out there in the universe that led your soul here today? What energy are you ready to release, and what destiny are you ready to embrace? Let's find out together. There's a quiet intelligence in the heart, a knowing that arrives long before the mind is ready to accept. In the days between May 15th and 17th, Leo, that knowing grows stronger. What you've been sensing, the distance, the subtle unraveling, the shift in energy, is not random. It reflects a larger energetic tide shaped by cosmic alignment, specifically the Sun, your ruling celestial body, entering a tense aspect with Uranus, the Great Awakener. This isn't just planetary tension. It's a nudge toward clarity. It's a challenge disguised as liberation. There are moments in life when the outer world continues in routine, texts are still exchanged, dinners still shared, schedules still coordinated, but underneath, something sacred is dissolving. Not loudly, not angrily, but gently, like dew evaporating at sunrise. You've likely already felt it in your chest, not as pain, but as absence. A soft grief with no event to blame. A presence that's fading not from betrayal, but from transformation. That's what this moment is asking you to recognize, not who hurt you, but what has naturally completed its time with you. Astrologically, when the Sun meets Uranus in a hard aspect, the heart is challenged to stretch beyond attachment. Uranus governs disruption, but not for destruction's sake, rather to liberate us from what we've outgrown. It's not here to rip things away, but to illuminate what no longer aligns with who we are becoming. And because you are ruled by the Sun, Leo, this experience cuts close to the core of your identity. You are someone who loves fully, fiercely, loyally. But even a lion must leave a familiar savanna when the soil no longer feeds its roots. This is where the gift lies, the opportunity to distinguish comfort from truth. Just because something once brought you warmth doesn't mean it still serves your fire. The Tower card, even in its reversed position, whispers not of chaos, but of cracks in the walls you've long leaned on. Not to hurt you, but to free you. It is the kind of falling apart that comes after too much quiet holding on. And sometimes, endings that arrive gently are the ones that ask us to pay closer attention, because they come not to punish, but to invite presence. If you listen closely, there's a question being asked of you. Are you willing to let go of what no longer grows with you, even if it still smiles at you from across the room? It's not an accusation. It's a call to honesty. There is a teaching here, the kind that says we cannot hold both the past and the future in the same hand. Something must be released, not because it was wrong, but because you've outgrown its shape. And when the heart knows this, it begins to soften its grip, not out of weakness, but because it is wise. In some traditions, it is said that the stream flows because it does not resist the curve of the rocks. There's no need to force anything now. The invitation is simply to notice the change in tone, the way your laughter no longer feels quite as free in their presence, the way your soul begins to quiet when you're near them. These are not judgments. They are mirrors. And your heart, radiant, royal, ready, is asking you to follow its quiet pull, not out of resentment, but with reverence for the role this person played, and the path that now diverges. You don't need to explain. You only need to accept. The beauty of this kind of transition is that it does not demand drama or final words. It only asks for stillness. And in that stillness, a deeper kind of truth rises, the truth that you are no longer who you were, and that is not a loss. It is a beginning. Letting go is often misunderstood as weakness, when in truth, it is the purest form of wisdom, the kind that doesn't come from logic or strength, but from quiet observation and the willingness to move with life rather than against it. After sensing the subtle unraveling of a connection, the next step isn't resistance, it's release. Not the kind that happens in one grand gesture, but the kind that happens in the soft decisions you make when you're finally honest with yourself. There is a natural rhythm in all things, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and trying to hold something past its natural season only leads to stagnation. You may have given everything you had, time, tenderness, devotion. You may have tried to bend and shape yourself to keep something alive. But when the frequencies no longer match, when the mutual growth has stopped, that effort becomes a form of self-abandonment. What once felt noble turns into heaviness, and that heaviness is the body's way of saying, You are carrying what no longer belongs to you. In the same way that a tree sheds its leaves when autumn comes, not out of fear or failure but in trust that spring will come again, so too are we invited to let go. This isn't about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about choosing alignment over attachment. When you no longer resonate with someone's energy, it doesn't mean either of you failed. It simply means that a cycle has completed. And honoring that truth is a profound act of compassion, for them and for yourself. There is an insight taught through lived experience. Not everything that leaves your life is meant to be chased. Some things come to teach, to reflect, to ignite a lesson, and once that purpose is fulfilled, clinging becomes a form of suffering. That's why letting go is freedom. Because you're not walking away out of defeat, but out of deep understanding that your path now requires space to expand. There's a quiet kind of clarity that arises when we stop trying to force what's fading. You begin to breathe differently. The mind softens its grip. The heart starts to open again, not to what was, but to what can be. The lesson here is that freedom isn't about escaping others, it's about returning to yourself. To the version of you that no longer has to shrink or silence parts of your spirit just to make a connection feel whole. And it's in this gentle departure that true power reveals itself, not the kind that conquers, but the kind that surrenders, wisely. There is a line that says, "What belongs to you will come to you, and what does not will fall away, no matter how tightly you hold it." This isn't resignation, it's clarity. When you stop chasing what isn't meant for you, you begin to attract what is. And that shift doesn't happen outside of you, it starts within, the moment you give yourself permission to release. Like the death card in tarot, this moment symbolizes not loss, but transformation. It is the composting of the old, the sacred turning of pain into space. Something is being cleared not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because something more aligned, more peaceful, and more reflective of your current vibration is waiting just beyond this ending. And to receive it, all you have to do is let go, gently, honestly, and without guilt. Just let it fall, like a leaf finally ready to return to the earth. Transformation rarely looks like a grand event. More often, it arrives as a soft shift, the moment when the weight you've been carrying quietly begins to loosen. What felt like loss only a short time ago now reveals itself as spaciousness. And Leo, that is what this part of your journey is really about. Not losing someone, but being gently returned to your own center, the place where your energy breathes freely, unshaped by the expectations or rhythms of others. Numerology during these days brings the vibration of 5 and 9. 5 is the pulse of change, unexpected, sometimes uncomfortable, but always catalytic. 9 signals an ending, not in despair, but in fulfillment. Together, they form a cosmic invitation. Let go with awareness, so you can rise with intention. There is no need to dramatize the closure. It's already happening, and your only task now is to honor it with clarity. This is not a time for holding on. It's a time for letting go with grace. There is a kind of discipline, almost meditative, in learning to stop grasping. In a world that tells us to fix, to explain, to control, what happens when we choose instead to release? That's the alchemy of this moment. You don't need to make sense of everything. You only need to become still enough to feel what is true. And from that truth, you begin the work of clearing, not because you're erasing someone from your life, but because you're reclaiming the space that relationship once filled. This is where healing becomes tangible. Not in abstract thinking, but in the quiet rituals of release. Write the letter you'll never send. Change the photo that reminds you of who you were, not who you're becoming. Rearrange the room, even slightly, a new plant, a shift in the lighting, a change in scent, so that your physical space begins to reflect your internal evolution. These small acts are not insignificant. They are declarations. And they send a message not just to your mind, but to your nervous system. I am choosing to move forward. Color can support you here too. Copper orange, the color of creativity and second chances, reawakens your life force. Sapphire blue, deep and cool, calms the emotional body and eases the soreness of letting go. These aren't just aesthetic choices. They are vibrational tools that align your outer world with the frequency of release and renewal. Let them work quietly alongside you as you navigate this passage. There's a story in the breath. Inhale, expand, exhale, release. No one questions this rhythm. We don't cling to the inhale or resist the exhale. We trust the cycle. This is the same trust being asked of you now. Letting go is not the end of love. It's a different kind of love, one that respects timing, growth, and impermanence. What was beautiful doesn't become untrue just because it ended. And what's ahead doesn't diminish what's behind. You are allowed to honor both. When we stop insisting that something stay just because it once felt right, we open the door to what's next. And not just anything, but something more aligned with the person you're becoming. There's wisdom in the spaces we clear, and there's dignity in the way we choose to clear them. This isn't about rushing forward. It's about walking deliberately, with presence. You're not running away. You're returning to your values, your voice, your inner balance. And from there, Leo, everything real will rise to meet you. Once you've cleared the space, emotionally, energetically, even physically, something subtle but profound begins to shift. You no longer reach outward in urgency. There is a stillness inside, not empty but full of quiet readiness. And this is where the recalibration begins. Not in the moment of letting go, but in the stillness that follows it. That's when life begins to respond differently, not because others have changed, but because you have. You've stopped broadcasting need, and started radiating truth. Leo, your sign rules the heart. Not just in a romantic sense, but in its deeper nature, generosity, creative power, and the ability to love without restraint. And while that open-hearted nature is your greatest strength, it also leaves you vulnerable to overextending, especially in relationships where your light is admired but not always understood. The old dynamic, where you had to explain yourself, defend your emotions, or wait for others to catch up to your depth, is dissolving. Not because you've hardened, but because your energy is beginning to attract people who already feel life the way you do. That is the reward of alignment. What's happening now is a kind of social rebirth. Your relational field is no longer orbiting around familiarity or habit. It's being reorganized according to resonance, a matching of frequency, not history. This is why you may start encountering people who seem new yet oddly familiar. Conversations that flow easily, without effort. A sense of mutual recognition without needing to overshare. These aren't coincidences. They are reflections. And they come not because you were chasing them, but because you've become a version of yourself who is finally ready to be met. There is a simple principle that echoes through many teachings. When you stop searching, you begin receiving. This isn't passivity. It's presence. You no longer spend energy trying to force connections. You allow them to arise naturally, trusting that who is meant for you will feel drawn to you not for what you do, but for who you are when you are simply being. That's the magnetism of authenticity. It doesn't shout. It doesn't perform. It just exists, steady, warm, undeniable. You may notice that your need to be understood softens. Not because it no longer matters, but because you realize that understanding happens effortlessly in the right company. You don't have to translate your inner world. The right people will speak your language, not necessarily in words, but in attention, in rhythm, in energy. And in that, there's a healing. A restoration of the part of you that used to believe love had to be earned or explained. Your heart will still be bold, Leo. That won't change. But now it beats with discernment. It no longer chases recognition from those who cannot offer it. It simply shines, knowing that those meant to walk beside you will recognize the light, not the spotlight, but the steady, golden warmth that lives beneath all your strength. And when they find you, they'll stay. Not because you asked, but because their energy aligns with yours, and in that alignment, everything flows. So breathe. Let this version of you settle. Let the new connections emerge on their own timeline. You're not here to convince anyone of your worth. You're here to be a lighthouse, steady, radiant, rooted. The ones meant for you are already on their way. Sometimes, what we call destiny arrives without sound. There is no warning, no final conversation, no visible sign of closure, just a subtle shift in the air, the way silence starts to feel heavier, or how once effortless conversations begin to require effort. This is how real change often begins. Not through a dramatic event, but through the quiet realization that something within us is no longer matching something, or someone, outside of us. And when that realization becomes impossible to ignore, it's not a failure. It's a signal that you've outgrown a rhythm that once felt natural. Leo, because you live so fully through the heart, these moments can feel disorienting. You don't walk away easily. You stay, you hold on, you give the benefit of the doubt. But there comes a time when love shifts shape, not into resentment, but into clarity. You can feel it in the way your spirit starts to contract around someone who once made you feel expansive. And the longer you stay in that space, the more you begin to sense that you're holding yourself back, not because you're afraid, but because you've changed. The most powerful truths often don't shout. They arrive as intuition, as the quiet voice that says, "This no longer feels right." And ignoring that voice doesn't make the feeling disappear, it just delays the growth that's waiting for you on the other side. This is where self-awareness becomes your compass. You don't need proof. You don't need permission. You only need to listen and trust that even subtle disconnection is worthy of your attention. There is a concept that when a flower blooms, it does not look back at the soil it grew from in regret. It simply opens because that is what it was meant to do. In the same way, your growth may naturally create distance from those who are not expanding in the same direction. That is not a judgment, it is an observation. And learning to honor that distance is a form of compassion. You don't have to wait for the other person to understand. You don't need to convince anyone of why you feel the way you do. You're not walking away to punish them. You're walking forward because that is where your path now leads. This kind of separation is not loud or messy. It's sacred in its quietness. And the more gently you release, the more space you create, not only for yourself, but for the other person as well. You are not abandoning them. You are respecting the limits of the connection as it currently exists. You are allowing life to take its natural course, without clinging or forcing. This is a kind of maturity that doesn't seek control, but accepts the unfolding. It helps, during times like these, to root yourself in affirmations that remind you of your agency. I give myself permission to move forward, gently and powerfully. That one phrase carries an entire philosophy. You don't have to fight your way into freedom. You can breathe your way into it. And the more you remember that you are the creator of your experience, the less you will feel like a victim of circumstances. Another affirmation worth repeating: I am not a victim, I am the author of my reality. This reminds you that while you cannot control who grows with you, you can choose how you respond when they no longer do. You can choose honesty over guilt. You can choose clarity over confusion. And you can choose to walk forward, not because the door was slammed shut, but because your heart knows it's time. And finally, I am worthy of connections built on mutual respect and soul resonance. You don't need to settle for anything less. When you act from this space, a space of awareness, of grace, of courage, the path ahead unfolds without force. The right people will find you, not because you sought them, but because you became the version of yourself that no longer settles for almost. If you're still here with me now, Leo, it means your heart has heard exactly what it needed. Not just as curiosity, but as deep recognition. You didn't arrive here by accident, and you didn't stay through this entire message because you were unsure. You stayed because, somewhere inside you, a quiet knowing has awakened. The kind of knowing that doesn't shout, it simply whispers, yes. It's time. You don't have to keep holding on. You don't have to keep proving yourself, or waiting for someone else to understand your worth. Real love, whether it's romantic, spiritual, or the love you offer yourself, doesn't ask for sacrifice at the expense of your soul. It asks for truth. And sometimes, that truth is this: a connection has served its season, and now, it's time to honor it by letting it go. But letting go, Leo, is not the same as losing. It's returning. Returning to your own path. Your center. Your rhythm. Can you ask yourself, honestly, am I holding on because of love, or because I'm afraid of who I'll be without them? And if the answer stirs discomfort, know that it's not shame, it's clarity calling you forward. Can you release with love, not because you're giving up, but because you're ready to rise? There is immense power in choosing yourself without apology. In standing tall not in defense, but in gentle self-respect. Every time you release what no longer aligns with your becoming, you open up room for peace, for clarity, and for new people to meet you where you really are. You're not being left behind. You're being invited to go ahead. Into something more spacious. More whole. More honest. And so, I invite you to pause. To breathe. To write, if you feel called. or simply to feel the edges of this truth as it settles. You are allowed to shift. You are allowed to evolve. And you are absolutely allowed to walk away from what has already let go of you, even if the words were never spoken. Tell me in the comments below, have you been seeing signs too? Angel number 111, a new beginning. 555, a massive life shift. Or 999, the end of a karmic chapter. These aren't coincidences. They're confirmation. Drop your number in the comments and let this community reflect it back to you. And if this message resonated, if something deep inside you said, yes, this is for me, then honor that by helping us spread the light. Click that like button. Subscribe to Eternal Mindfulness. This is a space for your awakening. And when you turn on the notification bell, you'll be the first to receive what the universe is preparing to reveal next, messages of love, guidance, healing, and forward movement. Just like this one. Thank you, not just for watching, but for listening. For trusting your intuition. For being brave enough to meet yourself right here, right now. You are never alone in this. Even in moments of quiet parting, the universe is walking right beside you, aligning, guiding, preparing. And one last thing, Leo, the next person who enters your life, they won't love you for what you give, or for how hard you try. They'll love you simply because you are you. That's not just hope. That's alignment. That's your path unfolding. And you're ready.